could say that self-abidance was the deeper aspect of self-inquiry. So most people mistake themselves for a bundle of thoughts, feelings, images, memories, activities, sensations, etc. So in response to this, the first step we take in self-inquiry is to ask a question such as, what is it that knows or is aware of my thoughts, feelings, sensations, etc.? Whatever it is that knows or is aware of my objective experience is what we call I. So the same question could be reformulated, who or what am I? And there are, as we discussed earlier in the week, there are many other formulations of the same question. What is it that cannot be removed from me? What is it that has been with me all my life? What is the continuous element in all experience, etc.? All these questions lead the mind away from its objective content towards the source or the essence of the mind. So self-inquiry starts usually with a question, an investigation. What is it that knows my experience? Who am I? But then once that question has been asked, there is nothing more for the mind to do, because anything that the mind did would be directed towards some kind of objective experience. So we ask the question and then we wait for the answer. And the waiting is self-abidance. So self-inquiry it's a translation for the Sanskrit term Atma Vichara. And self-inquiry or self-investigation is not a very accurate translation of the term, because normally when we inquire into something or we investigate something, we engage in a series of thoughts and perceptions about that thing. Well, we cannot think of ourselves, we cannot perceive ourselves, because there is nothing objective there to think about or perceive. So by far the larger part of self-inquiry is really self-abidance. We just ask the question, what is it that knows or is aware of my experience? Whatever it is that knows our thoughts, sensations and perceptions is obviously not itself a thought, sensation or perception. So right there we cease directing our attention towards the objects of experience, and we allow the attention to gradually, in most cases, occasionally suddenly, but gradually in most cases, the attention then sinks or relaxes deeper and deeper into its source. And that sinking of the attention into its source is self-abidance. It's what Ramana Maharshi referred to as sinking the mind into the heart of awareness. It's what the Christian mystics refer to as the practice of the presence of God. The presence of God is indicated by the name I am. So another portal into self-abidance would be simply to take the thought I am and allow one's attention to go to the experience that is referred to when we say I am. Rumi referred to the same process, if we can call it a process. Really it's a non-process, but the same when he said flow down and down and down in ever-widening rings of being. This sense that it's a flowing downwards or inwards or backwards of the attention, not forwards towards someone or something. And as is beautifully expressed in Rumi's words, as the attention flows down towards our essential being, towards that to which we refer when we say I am, it widens or loses its limitations. So all these phrases indicate in various different traditions this sinking of the mind away from its objective content into its source. And although that process or non-process is initiated in most cases by a question, by far the larger part of self-inquiry is just asking the question and remaining silent and open, just abiding as oneself. The purpose of life is to be happy. It's very easy to check that because happiness is what everybody wants above all else. If you were asked, would you rather be happy or enlightened, which would you go for?
Happy.
Yes, we want happiness even above enlightenment. In fact, the only reason we want to be enlightened is because we think it will bring us happiness. So it's really happiness that we want. So happiness is the highest prize. It's the purpose of our lives. And most people seek happiness in objects, substances, activities, etc. So here we seek happiness directly. That's why it's called the direct path. We go directly to the source of happiness, ourself. And then having discovered the source of happiness in ourselves, we then turn outwards again and explore our experience of the body and the world in the light of this new understanding, so that the experience of the body and the world are gradually permeated by this new feeling understanding.
Outward-facing path?
That's the outward-facing path, for instance, what we were doing this morning. Whereas the meditation we did, for instance, on the first evening, that was just the inward-facing path. What do we mean by I? Paying no attention to objects at all. Who is the one that knows these objects? I know them. What is the nature of this knowing I? Until we know the nature of that knowing I, nothing can be known for sure about what that I knows. That's the inward-facing path.
You know, when I say progressively increasing your engagement in truth, beauty, and love over time, what I'm meaning is it seems like a lot of us are stuck in a lack of abiding, a lack of... Because you said that...
Chronic awareness deficit disorder.
Yeah.
If we know any object of experience, you understand what I mean by an object, a thought, feeling, sensation, etc. Any object of experience is something other than ourself. We stand as the knower of that object. I, the subject, knows or is aware of the object. So all objects of experience are known, or at least seem to be known, in this subject-object relationship, dualistic knowledge or experience. All experience appears in that way, apart from one unique experience, which is our knowledge of ourself. In our knowledge of ourself, the I that knows and the I that is known are the same. So there is no subject-object duality in our knowledge of ourself. It is as such a unique knowledge, a knowledge that is unlike any other knowledge. All other knowledge and experience take place in duality. The only experience there is that does not involve a subject that knows and an object that is known is our knowledge of ourself, or awareness is awareness of awareness.
When I ask myself, who am I? The time in between asking the question and formulating an answer in my mind, that to me seems to be the knowing.
Yes, but when I ask you the question, usually the question I use is, are you aware? And then, as a result of the question, you have to discover in your own experience whether or not you are aware. And in order to discover that you are aware, you have to go to the experience of being aware. Having, so to speak, had that experience, or having known the experience of being aware, you then formulate that experience by saying yes. What you're really saying is, yes, it is my experience that I am aware. In other words, what you're saying is, I am aware that I am aware. So in between the question, are you aware, and the answer, yes, you, awareness, become aware of yourself. In fact, you were always aware of yourself, because awareness is always self-aware. But your awareness of yourself was mixed with your awareness of objects. And your awareness of objects seemed to eclipse your awareness of yourself. So you seemed, as a result, to have forgotten yourself or overlooked yourself, and just as a result, to be aware of objects. So it seems to be a return to yourself. It's not really a return to yourself, because you never left yourself. You cannot leave yourself. But for one who is lost in the objects of experience, it is legitimate to say that awareness, as it were, returns to itself and becomes aware of itself again. It recognizes itself or knows itself again. And that's not strictly true. It always knows itself. But in the context of the conversation, it's legitimate to say awareness becomes aware of itself again, or recognizes itself.
So then abiding in it is just repeating that experience over and over again, right?
Well, you don't have to repeat. You don't have to keep asking the question, am I aware, am I aware? You just have to ask the question once, and that takes you directly to the experience of being aware.
But at first, in the process of and then transition.
if you find that your attention goes out again to the objects of awareness, then you can repeat the question, but I don't recommend that you do it mechanically. You could ask another question, such as, but what is it that is aware of these thoughts? And that immediately takes you to the same place.
So when you're asking us all these questions in a row, you're basically forcing us to abide in awareness.
Not forcing, I hope, inviting you.
guiding us.
Okay. Yes, I'm inviting each of our minds back to its source.
Okay.
But it's very much, it's not it's certainly not a forcing, but nor is it even a discipline or an effort. It should be an enjoyable path that is initiated by interest, by love, by interest in and love of truth. We shouldn't have to discipline ourselves to go back, but rather ask the question, but what is it that illuminates my experience? I mean, what could be more interesting to know the nature of that which illuminates all experience and renders all experience possible? Can you suggest anything more interesting than to know the nature of that which makes experience possible? I mean, the mind should not have to be disciplined to go there. It would have to be, really, it should be disciplined to leave there. Why would you want to leave that? Because it is the source of peace and happiness. It's the place where it is peace and happiness. So here we don't go there out of effort and discipline, or if there is any effort, it's a loving effort. We go that out of interest. Being passionately interested in reality. How come there is experience? What is experience made of? How come that it is possible to know anything? What is it that renders experience knowable? What is the nature of myself? I'm always at the center of my experience. I have been with myself all my life. What am I really? None of my thoughts, feelings, sensations or perceptions have been with me all my life. Therefore, what am I? Can you think of a more interesting question than that? If you can, I would follow the more interesting question. But I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a more interesting question than that.
Great. That seems to clarify my understandings.
Okay,
good. It just seems like the two things that kind of stop that are physical resistance in the body and lack of stillness, not being able to still the mind and the body long enough to stay in that place.
No, but you're bringing in old ideas. Have I said anything this week about stilling the mind or the body? Ramana Maharshi never disciplined anybody to still their minds. These are ideas that come from other traditions that you're presuming are the same as this. They might be ultimately, but they take very different pathways. I don't recommend, and I've never recommended, and I've never heard Francis recommend it, or Jean Klein, or Atmananda Krishna Menon, or Ramana Maharshi recommend trying to still your mind or your body. All these people, they recommend getting to know yourself. Finding out who you really are, because you are always at the center of your experience. Unless you find the nature of the one that knows experience, you cannot know anything for sure about your known experience. Now, that discovery will have an impact on the mind and the body, but that impact is a byproduct, not the goal of this investigation. So be discriminating when you're exploring other paths, that all spiritual paths, be discriminating when you hear the phrase, oh, all spiritual paths are talking about the same thing. Well, of course, ultimately they are. But be discriminating about the different pathways, because there is contradictory suggestions given in different traditions, and you can't follow all of those suggestions. But don't spend your time trying to still your mind. Spend time trying to understand the nature of your mind. That will have an effect on the activity of your mind, but it will be a byproduct. Don't consider the activity of your mind a barrier to your understanding. If you will indulge me, I now want to comment on your story. I can't resist, even though you haven't asked a question about it. Because it's at some point in your story you said, why did God answer in this cryptic way, tell them I am sent you, instead of just saying who he really was? The point is, God didn't answer in a cryptic way. He did answer exactly and specifically who he really is. I am. And I want to we'll just do an experiment to make this really, to try to make this really clear. Each of you now, imagine that you had a magical iPhone, the iPhone 24, that that can take an image, not just of the visual perception in front of you, but that it's a multi-dimensional, multimedia camera that can take a snapshot of your entire experience now, your sensations, your perceptions, your thoughts, your images, the entire spectrum of your feeling. You take a snapshot of it, and then we now exhibit 150 snapshots of our current experience, and there will be 100 in each snapshot. These multimedia, multidimensional snapshots will be different. 150 different people, 150 different snapshots. Now, if each of us were to press the little camera image in the bottom right-hand corner of our screen, and the camera will flip, and then we take a selfie. A selfie not of what we are experiencing, but of the one that experiences. We take a selfie of ourself, the one we refer to when we say I or I am. So we all do that now. And then we exhibit 150 selfies. What will be the difference between them? They'll all be the same. Now, imagine that God were to do the same experiment. God, who, whatever we imagine God to be, God is omniscient. So God knows everything there is to be known. This is one of the classical definitions of God. God knows everything. So whatever anyone is thinking, feeling, perceiving, sensing at any moment, including all the animals and the insects, and it is known by God. So when God takes the image of of her experience, we cannot even imagine what the image looks like, but nevertheless we exhibit it, and it's a very complex. Let's not even speculate about what it looks like. But now God also clicks the camera image, the camera flips, and she takes an image of herself. Not what she knows, but of herself. Of the experience to which God would refer if God were to simply say I, or myself, or I am. And then we exhibit that image. What would be the difference between God's selfie and our selfie? What would be the difference in the experience to which God refers when God says I or I am, and the experience to which each of us refer when we say I or I am? There would be no difference. Our being is God's being. You said a beautiful thing without realizing it when you were telling your story. You said that the consideration about I am. You said it's never really been in the foreground of my mind, but it was always in the background of my mind. I don't know if you realized how accurate that is. The I am it's like a window in the back of each of our minds, a space through which the mind goes, away from the objects of experience. And in that space, that openness, that is the portal where each of our minds goes on its way back to its essence, God's presence. The I am, not some mystical, extraordinary, unknowable I am, but the very simple, intimate, familiar, obvious experience that each of us refers to when we say I am. That is God's presence in us. That's how close God's presence is to us. God's presence is the experience to which we refer when we say simply, I am. So when Moses said to God, tell them that I am sent you, he wasn't being cryptic. He was being so simple, so clear, so experiential, so ordinary. Any other answer would have been cryptic. But this was the cleanest, clearest way God could indicate to Moses what it really is.